By the end of this video, you will learn the following. What is AWS S3? S3 tiering, creating an S3 bucket, uploading files to S3, managing files and permissions, accessing S3 via AWS Management Console, and deleting an S3 bucket. Hi, my name is Elias and I'm a DevOps analyst for Smoothstack. Welcome to this beginner-friendly tutorial on AWS Simple Storage Service, also known as AWS S3. AWS S3 is a scalable, durable, virtually unlimited, and highly available cloud object storage service. S3 allows you to store data such as images, videos, documents, and more. S3 generally has 99.99% availability and 11 nines of durability represented as a percentage. S3 has 6 tiers: standard, standard and frequent access, one zone and frequent access, Glacier, Glacier Deep Archive, and machine learning backed intelligent tiering. In this tutorial, I'll guide you through the process of setting up an S3 bucket, uploading and managing files, and the key concepts. To get the most out of this tutorial, you should have the following: an AWS account, a basic understanding of cloud concepts, and the AWS command line interface installed. Alright, welcome to the AWS S3 demo. First things first, we're going to go ahead and hit this button here to create our bucket. Your bucket's name must be unique to the AWS global namespace, so we're going to call this ES Test Bucket 909. Keep it in US West 1. You have a setting here to copy existing settings from another bucket. ACLs are your access control lists. We're not really going to delve into these today because they're kind of for more specific use cases. Generally, when you create a bucket, by default, all public access is blocked. This is good because it follows the principle of least access. Bucket versioning, this allows you to store multiple objects, the same object, at different versions of itself, which is very nice. Tags for your bucket. Encryption, there's 3 types, but we're not really going to talk about this at all today. And object lock. This allows your objects to exist under a write once, read many model. Helps your objects from being deleted or overwritten. Go ahead and create that. Alright, now that our bucket's created, we're going to go ahead and enter our bucket and upload our first object. First things first is I'll create a folder. Call this object. Something to note is that folders in S3 don't actually do anything. They're purely visual. All objects in S3 are stored at the same level. Encryption. Create that. We'll upload our first object in here. I'll go ahead and add a file. You can also add whole folders if you want to add a bunch of files at once. It'll give you the destination, including some of the details, like whether or not versioning is enabled, the encryption type, and the object lock. You can also enable versioning. Permissions, this will let you know the permissions of the object. Properties. Here you can actually change the storage class. So if you want to send it directly into something like Glacier, you're more than welcome to. Encryption, additional checksums, and tags and metadata for the specific object. Alright, it's uploaded. If you're using the CLI, you'll also get a 200 response back. Alright, so now that you're here in the bucket, let's go over what happens when you open up the object itself. So here's the object URL. This is where it's stored in terms of the actual URL of the bucket. You will not be able to access this unless public access is enabled. Tags, S3 URIs, the region, the owner, modified, all those good details. You can open it here, download it, copy the S3 URI, and do some actions to it, delete it, all that good fun stuff. Down here, of course, all of the details on whether it's versioned, object lock, all that stuff. Storage class, the encryption, checksums, tags, metadata, and object lock as well. Alright, so we're going to head back into the bucket here to look at the properties. Here we have the region, the ARN, and the creation date. You can enable versioning here. Tags for the entire bucket, encryption, intelligent tiering, archive configurations. This is for sending objects specifically into the archive tiers. Server access logging. Do you want to see who accesses your bucket? When? This will help you. More specifically, CloudTrail. You can tie in to this bucket. So if you want to record the events that happen to your objects, directories, so on. It'll reach out to the AWS service of CloudTrail and record that for you. Event notifications. This will allow you to basically enact operations on the objects in your bucket upon a given event. That reaches out to AWS Event Bridge. Transfer acceleration. If you want to speed up the transfer of your objects from one place to another, enabling this will help you with that. Object lock. Request your pays. So when people are requesting stuff from your bucket, you can say, hey, you have to pay for that data transfer. And static website hosting. This is pretty cool. If you have HTML, CSS files, and you have a whole website that doesn't require dynamic rendering at all, you can do that right out of the bucket. All right, and we'll move on to the next section here. Permissions. So right over here, it'll tell you exactly what's up with it. Nothing's public right now. Great. Now, if you want to make things public, you can edit stuff here. This currently blocks all public access, but if you want to enable certain public access, you can, click around, turn on what you want, but generally operating under the idea of the least amount of permissions given is good. Now, we'll go down to the bucket policy. This is a JSON policy following the structure of AWS IAM. Fortunately, they give you some good tools here for facilitating those permissions. If you want these objects to be read by a Kinesis stream or something like that, you could very much set that up. The permissions need to allow the transfer to happen, so you can specifically tie this in with other AWS accounts or services. Object ownership, ACLs are disabled. And CORS, so cross-origin resource sharing. If you have an object in your bucket that's traveling through many layers of an application stack, chances are you're going to need to have some CORS enabled. A lot of times you'll get errors on those requests unless CORS is specifically enabled. Very important for applications. Now moving on to metrics. If you want to see stuff like the total bucket size, the number of objects in your bucket, this is the area to look for. This is super important for tiering. If you want to make sure that you're utilizing your money in the most effective way, these metrics will let you know whether or not your objects are being stored in the right areas. And that's really what this storage class analysis is for. You can set up a configuration that'll look at your objects and determine whether or not they're being stored in the right spot. Replication metrics, these are for replication rules. We are going to go over that in the next section here. All right, in management, this is where we set up lifecycle rules, replication rules, inventory configurations. So for lifecycle rules, we'll go ahead and create one real quick. These are pretty straightforward and pretty helpful. Call it test. We'll apply it to all objects in the bucket to keep it simple. Now, over a course of, let's say, time, I want something to happen to my objects. I want them to move between storage classes as a good example, so we'll start with that. Go ahead and check this. You can check multiple. So if you want things to get deleted, you want things to expire, this is where you can select those things. Now, you can add transitions, so if you want to make one rule to transition your objects between many tiers, you're welcome to. Let's just say I want to send it to one zone infrequent access after 30 days. Very straightforward, easy to create, awesome. Now let's go to replication rules. Very straightforward, it's replicating. We're not actually going to fully enable this due to the fact that we're only operating out of one bucket. We can call it test here. The status, enabled or disabled when created, the priority of this. Now we have our source bucket. Obviously the bucket we're in, we're setting up the rule here. Now, again, you can do filters, but we'll just apply it to all objects. And then you can pick a destination. Where do we want this to go? Of course, this will need an IAM role. It's not like you can just send things between other things without the permissions in both places being absolutely correct. Encryption. And then you can also change the storage class as it gets uploaded to that other bucket. Got a bunch of additional settings here, metrics, so on and so forth, but we'll cancel that. So, inventory configurations basically generate giant reports on all the objects of your bucket, and they can send it to another bucket, and so on and so forth. We'll go through that real quick. Call this test. Send it a scope. You can prefix it. So if you're trying to get a set of objects that exist within a certain prefix, this will define that scope for you, but we can just include all versions. Destination bucket, this account, or you can send it to a different account. Here, permissions. Frequency of these reports, what output format you want them in, and then you can encrypt them as well. And you can also select some additional data from each object for it to contain. So now we'll talk about access points. Access points are endpoints that allow you to enable certain operations from certain places to certain objects on your bucket. For now, we'll call it test. Now, the request can either come from your VPC, which you would define here, or from the internet. Since we don't have any VPCs right now, we're just going to keep it in the internet. And then, yeah, it's just a policy at this point. So here you would define which objects and which actions this endpoint would be allowed to enact on your object. All right, so now that we've gone over the main aspects of the bucket, we're going to go ahead and empty it and delete it. So first things first, you're going to go out here. You're going to go ahead and hit empty. You're going to have to type this out. All right. Now we can delete it. You're going to have to type out the name of the full bucket and then delete it. And just like that, we finished up. Today, we went over some of the basics of AWS S3. We now know the details of S3, how to create buckets, upload files, manage permissions, and access data via the AWS Management Console. Remember, AWS S3 is a versatile and powerful tool for cloud storage. Thank you for following along with this tutorial. If you found it helpful, please leave a like and subscribe for more AWS and cloud-related content. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Until next time, happy learning.